The gentlemen are set to give you that incredible talk as to the question of peace. They all are specialists and gurus in these areas, and they tell us whether we are faring on well in regards to countering terrorism in the country, or there is something that is amiss. Is it something that is bound to be constant? And how then do we make sure that we strike a balance and guarantee ourselves peace? That is what we'll be discussing, even as the world commemorates International Day of Peace, established sometime in 1981. Year-round, we continue to talk of what needs to be done so that the world can enjoy ultimate peace. And the United Nations conversation is also on, understanding that our president has also joined the rest of the other presidents and other leaders, or world leaders, in, just this UNGE conversation. So please be part and parcel of the conversation. Tell us what you think about, the situation of peace in the country, even as we try to unpack this. Once again, the guests this evening, right next to me, I would say next or close to me, is Dr. Enoch Makanga, the National Chairperson of Protective and Safety Association of Kenya. Thank you so much, sir, for creating time. And next to him is Chris Otieno, who's a security expert. Asante sana, Chris, for your time.
Thank you so
Last
much.
but not least, John Kinothia, leadership and security strategist. Your messages in this time when the world commemorates International Peace Day, do we really, can we confidently say that we have made great strides in addressing the concerns of peace and largely terrorism, which we focus on this evening? We start with you, Chris.
I want to say that even though we have made a number of strides back here at home, on the international arena, a lot of challenges are still there. We know that these terrorists, they'll mostly attack Western interests. We know there's been a lot of growth in terms of Western interests in Kenya. We've seen also the nation of Israel has right now, current time, fighting in 8 war fronts. That still brings in a lot of challenges in terms of the exposure and the risk velocity that we have in the globe. Of course, there are also many other wars that are being fought across the globe. The nation of Palestine today is being discussed in the United Nations General Assembly. There are some Western countries that have decided to recognize that nation, and there are some who are still not to recognize that nation. The recognition, as viewed by other nations, that is going to amplify the activities of those who are anti-Israel nation, and that could mean a lot of other things to us. So what we are saying here is that we need us to keep greater strides in terms of advancing our people, the guys who go put their lives in the front line to fight terrorism. We need to train them, we need to give them the right gears, and we need to have a national strategy that we can use to respond to disasters as soon as they show up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and the theme this year is that peace is not passive. Kinothia, I come to you.
Yes.
It lives in our choices, our communities, and our care. That is for another and the earth itself. Most of the times we want to be driven by these themes. Today, we focus much on, peaceful coexistence and what it can do to ensuring that we counter terrorism. Terrorism was the theme some time back, I think in 2023. Today, in 2025, we're talking about a whole different theme. Do you suppose that even as we, in paper and pen, or in pen on paper, even as we write, even as we come up with policies, even as we come with the best of themes, are we really always committed to this? And I know this is at the global stage.
Well, thanks for having us. Human beings naturally are tribal creatures, and not necessarily tribal in the context we know it here, where there's tribes in terms of ethnic tribes. But people group themselves according to various ways they identify themselves.
Right.
Some people will place greater emphasis on religion. Other ones will place greater emphasis on ethnicity. Others will place greater emphasis on political differences and all kinds of factions. Those drive some of the root causes and factors that when you're assessing matters of conflict and matters of peace, those root causes are the ones that will usually drive not only those conversations, but how people act. You talked about choices. People do choose to act a certain way based on one, those factional or religious or ethnic or political or any other sort of basis that they choose. And those come with their own biases. So people will usually, fuel their, positions based on those biases. Number two, it's also a matter of how strongly people feel about those things. You'll notice every time you talk about terrorism or counter-terrorism or peace, you'll talk of some people as being moderate, you talk of some people as being extremist about their views, and that polarizing nature that does drive the conversation. The third thing is, of course, interest. People act according to their interest, their geopolitical interest when you're thinking globally, their economic interest, their political interest, their all kinds of interest. So when you're dealing with human beings who by themselves act individually, of course, when we discuss topics like this, it's easy to think people are homogeneous, so that one quote-unquote tribe of people will act a certain way, and again, not necessarily ethnic tribe, but the way they identify. But even in those subgroupings, you will still find there are people who are rational, there are people who are objective, there are people who are different per se. So it's important to remember that at the bottom fundamental level, every human being makes choices about how they're going to act. Now, when you approach topics like terrorism, that's when now you start talking about things like radicalization, where somebody will actually evangelize a certain point of view. They'll mobilize a certain grouping of people to actually go, after a certain cause, and they'll prescribe a certain mode of action or a certain action, saying, hey, because we believe this way, and this we versus them sort of comes in, they are different from we, and as such we are going to do this and we are going to do that against them. So these are complex issues, and to address your fundamental question, they're not as easy. It's easier said than done, and at the surface they may look like very simple conversation, but when you peel the onion layers, it becomes a very complex layer of issues. Yes.
In all these complexities, we acknowledge that this particular day is a formation of the United Nations General Assembly, years and years back, and here we are today, a conglomeration of world leaders as well seated, in the United States for the same. Do you suppose that in all these indifferences that John highlights, we are trying rather too well to strike a balance? Are we at all? Because then, after all said and done, the international community, the global fraternity, must coexist despite the differences.
Yeah, from where I sit, thank you for inviting me. From where I sit, there's a very serious improvement from where we were. Okay. Right from the Westgate bombing and the Garissa University bombing, the government has put in serious initiatives. Sometimes the police cannot be able to announce what they are doing, but as we are in the circles of security, we know the role they are played. For example, the government came up with different units with the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, that have played a very critical role in preventing attacks. And they've done a serious work in terms of intelligence. Now with the anti-terrorism police, the guys who deal with the actual stuff now, following these guys and investigating these cases, they've also done a very wonderful job in terms of just getting to know what these guys are doing and preventing them. And even if you look at it from an enemy and a target perspective, these guys are just closer to us. We're just talking to Pony Forest, you are in Somali, you get into Wajir, you are in Somali. So these guys are more closer to us. So when an enemy is closer to you, the issue is, even if you put in place serious mechanisms, the truth of the matter is you'll always be overtaken by events. And I want to bring out a very good case study, the one for West Dusit, which, if you compare the Westgate attack, we took almost like 3 days. with the interior CS, the governor of Kajiado Lengo telling us, you know, those matters burning there, you know. You could see serious confusion. There was no coordinated approach on responding to the Westgate attack. And that's why we had so many casualties, we had so many problems, people died. And after that, I think the government came together and formed a multi-agency group that is watertight, and some of our Reiki guys and CSU are taken outside the country to be trained on how to be able to respond in case we have such a type of attack. And because of that training they are undergone, and getting the support from US, getting the support from Israel, I think we were able to neutralize the Dusit thing within just almost less than 2 hours. We were able to kill all these guys, and at least a few people died. Now, from that, it tells you Kenya has moved a very serious step as far as countering terrorism is concerned. The only problems we had is the issue of these guys changing tactics and changing positions, where they are now blowing up police vehicles along the Garissa, those northeastern provinces, maybe in Lamu, and changing tactics here and there. So it's a question of the security agencies, or those actually involved in countering terrorism, to also make sure that they align with the new tactics these guys are trying to apply. But as far as Nairobi is concerned, as far as Mombasa is concerned, people may not know, but I can tell you for sure, because I worked in the police in the counterterrorism department, and I was a bomb expert. I know the government has done an excellent job.
And I think we would want to ask that. Is it for the people to know, or is for the government and security experts to understand that security tenets are intact, and therefore there's no cause for alarm? Because I'm glad that you bring us home and you remind us of the Westgate attack. Still happening on the 21st of September, a day where the world commemorates the question of peace. Then you ask yourself, the irony of this all. Do you suppose, if you look at such events, reminding us of the Dusit Day too, that indeed we have made tremendous strides that would perhaps help us handle such a situation different in the event that it occurs? And back to the first question, is it for the government and for security and for the security experts to understand, or the entire nation, the citizens, to feel, like they are protected, to feel that element of security, wavering around them, and that they know that their government is in charge?
There are quite a number of pertinent issues here. The first issue that we need to discuss is, number one, the kind of technological advancement that we had in the 21st century are quite disruptive. And those who are antagonistic about what do we do as a nation to preserve our law and order, or our peace within our borders, they too are advancing their tactics. So the only thing that we are being called upon here as a government is to make sure that we are creating as much awareness as is possible. And time again, we see our government sending what we call security alerts. All right? Time and again, you would hear, avoid this place, avoid this place, avoid this place. Some could come as fake news, but some of them are quite a good alert to ensure that a majority of our people do not move certain areas. Because if you go back and look at what is the target of terrorism, is mass casualties. So the more we are able to separate masses of people from certain areas that could be targeted to these particular persons, then we are doing good. And our government has gone ahead to do that. If you go back to Westgate attack, our night operations were very difficult. Why were they difficult? Because our people did not have the equipment, for example, night vision, to enable them to go into those operation areas. So at night, we took a rest. And that, of course, gave time to those guys who had attacked us to regroup, to rearm, and actually go to their command center and really know what exactly to do. So it becomes the responsibility of the government to continually maintain the peace, law, and order within its borders. And there are many tactical ways and operational ways, using media, using, public participation, to just warn the nation and alert the nation exactly what we need to do in such kinds of circumstances. But in the background, the government does a lot of things, like my chairman has said. A lot of our people will be taken out to be trained. There'll be a lot of diplomatic engagements. There'll be military pacts signed here and there. There'll be support in terms of finances, equipment, and training that will come from other countries that are in the forefront to fight this kind of terrorism. You'll find those countries having their bases here in Kenya, military bases here in Kenya. What is their target? To study the activities that are being done by these extremist persons and convert that into countering this kind of thing. So yes, the government has that responsibility to make it aware to the citizens that this is what we are doing.
This is what is ongoing.
This is what is ongoing.
Do you feel at peace if you're going to look at Kenya's position and the numerous positions also that we have held, even at the global stage? I mean, for instance, to imagine just how much we lobbied for the much contested seat that is at the United Nations Security Council successfully. We are talking about us, owning that NATO, status. We're talking about our status in the regional place. Of course, some of the brother countries or sister countries have felt like maybe our position has not been out of goodwill, but all the same, we have occupied these critical positions. Do you suppose that the same, this particular seats have helped us or to align in addressing the question of security in the country, to that regional level and beyond?
Sure. So there are several issues to dissect there. The first one is anytime you're talking about security, especially in the context of terror, you have to remember that a terrorist is driven by ideology.
Okay.
And most of the time, that ideology has basic pillars or fundamentals that are driving them. Some of them just hate you because you're an enemy, per se, or directly or indirectly. So you're a friend of their enemy or you're a direct enemy. Some of them, like we said, have factional, ideological, political, religious differences. Yeah. And many times they will have a cause that they rally. Now, the other side of terror, which is a very fundamental question, is that of creating fear. If you notice, most terrorists will attack, places where they know people gather, where they can have maximum impact, mass casualty. But the real impact of terrorism is felt in the fear they sell, the fear they promote. Now, coming to your question, Kenya has made major strides, and many times in Kenya we don't give credit where it is due, but there's been a lot of strides. I mean, having a seat at the United Nations Security Council is not a small, feat. It's a big deal. Secondly, the major non-NATO ally designation, which we share with countries like Israel and many other countries out there that are major players on the security scene. So you do find that those come with unique benefits. You can purchase certain military and other types of specialized equipment that other countries who are non-NATO allies cannot purchase. But on a bigger sense, it means that you can have a better posture, you can have better preparedness, you can have from a strategic and tactical ability to deal with these threats. You are at a better position. Now, zooming in within the country, now the attack happened, I believe, in 2013, and that was a good 12 years ago. It looks like just like yesterday, and that's one of the impacts. We are still talking about it. People are still concerned when they go to certain public places, and a lot has been done. There have been laws that have been enacted that specifically helped the security agencies, both in how they deal with such events, empowering laws that specifically empower, like teaching judges and prosecutors how to know to prosecute terror uniquely from regular criminal activity. And more importantly, just equipping the security agencies to better respond to these threats. On the flip side, there's still room, for improvement, as my brothers observed. Security is a dynamic and revolving arena which changes every day. Just like just as you're improving and working on your strategies and tactics, so is the person who is planning these attacks and figuring out how to outmaneuver you. So in a general sense, we've come a long way. One major step is inter-security agency coordination. In terms of Westgate, you notice one of our major weaknesses was just that the sheer lack of very well coordinated inter-agency action and response to the event. That we've done a major job. Another area where you can see that there's certain improvement is that there have been a lot of prevention. Unfortunately, this is an area where not everything is publicized, so that every day terror threats are thwarted. Every day you uncover and are able to deal with threats on an ongoing basis, but they're not as publicized. But the fact that we haven't had major attacks of that nature since then, and more importantly, the fact that people are going on with their lives in malls, in other places on a regular and ongoing basis, there's a lot of credit to be given to the security agencies and even to the Kenyan public, because part of this, we talked about Dusit a bit earlier, and you notice one of the key failings in terms of weaknesses or exposure that we had was this idea of people living with people in a certain community, and these people have settled there. They seem to be flashing a lot of money. They seem to be well financed, but they keep a low profile below the radar.
Right.
We've come a long way from that, both from what is called a Nyumba Kumi perspective, but just teaching Kenyans to be vigilant, teaching them to be aware of their surrounding. In the military and other circles, they call it situational awareness, knowing who is around you, what is around you, and what you face. So it's important to give credit where it's due, and we've come a long way, and there's still room for improvement. And again, we keep enhancing our capabilities.
Yes, and many have asked, why is it that in the previous years or the past years, even though we note improvement, there's been this massive attacks in our country, if you're going to look at the regional aspect. And sometimes there's also that, spotlight focused on the local concerns that we have. The, ever ongoing Kapedo fights that, or the banditry attacks that we have not been able to manage. The regional altercations as to the question of insecurity, and Kenya, just stepping in to perhaps appear as though they are the peacemakers, yet it's not so good at home. Looking at the numerous Lamu attacks that continue to exist, that while we say we have made strides to adjust this, that while we say that we are at a better position, the questions still linger as to why just Kenya and not the other, say East African countries, if you're going to focus much on Uganda and Tanzania. And as well, why is it that these, troubles at home continue to bedevil us, and that we have managed to, calm or quell the massive kind of terrorist attacks that we're talking about? And just how much do they pose, an opening ground where, again, the terrorists could come and strike, just as they try to hide under the local attacks that continue to happen, Chris?
Kenya, in terms of geographical location, we have a neighbor who's a failed state. We have another neighbor who are struggling to establish themselves. We have another neighbor with a lot of lawlessness. So all these lawlessness and disorderly happening across our neighbors, somewhere they find their way into our country. Over many years, Kenya has been known to be a peace-loving country. And in terms of governance, we are much better than all guys who are around us. But when it comes to border security, there are a number of failures. When it comes to all internal governance, there are other areas that we are not doing very well. We know quite well that corruption has been, what would I say, is a big giant in our country. People coming from these countries that I've mentioned who lack governance, who lack peace, some of them are failed state, they find themselves into our country through purchase of citizenship. So all these are quite a big contributors. Another item, Kenya itself is quite big in tourism. And these tourists come from the West. And we know ideologically, those who are perpetrating terrorist activities are quite anti-Westerners. So for them to communicate a message to the world, that this is what we can do, they'll want to find easy targets where these Westerners conglomerate to celebrate themselves, find social life in there. If you look at Westgate, that is exactly what happened. Westgate was owned by Sony Foundation with a solid base in Tel Aviv, Israel. So when those guys came into our country, they were found this would be a target to communicate to those people out there that you would do what you will do in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, and other areas, but we can attack you in these other avenues. So that has continued. Also, radicalization at the coast. We have very many people at the coast who have been radicalized, leading to the name of Kenyan Mujahideen. 20% of Al-Shabaab's workforce, approximated, are Kenyans. What does that mean? They want to find in our citizens who can blend into the operation without the top guys whatsoever being factored into that. This has contributed a lot to other countries viewing Kenya as either a place they can go settle peace, like South Sudan did, right? Or a place where they can go exercise what they want to communicate to the West. That's why we were attacked at August bomb blasts and many other attacks. So all these all this sophistication and mix of very many things, right, allows Kenya to be, not allows, protracts Kenya as a place where all these events can happen at one given go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you talk about radicalization. Perhaps we could narrow down to that.
But I could add something on what Chris has said. You know, Kenya is the headquarters of UN. So what does that mean? All the NGOs, before they get to any other country within the East African region, Kenya is the first starting point. So with that, already it makes us vulnerable in terms of let's attack here, the first number. Number two, I think Kenya is the only country where the Nyumba Kumi initiative didn't work out. It worked out in Uganda, it worked out in Rwanda and in other places. So what do I mean? Because if you go to a place like Kitengela, or you go to a place like Kajiado, deep inside, or you go to a place like Mpeketoni, you will find 5 neighbors who don't know each other. So what does that mean? If anybody comes to Kenya and is able to do bad things, he is able to come and stay in a place like Kithunguri, and nobody knows what this guy is coming to do. So that has made our country fertile for these guys to be able to get ahead. And
are these gaps that we can address? Because
yes.
when we say that Nyumba Kumi has worked in Uganda and in other countries, and it's not working in Kenya, then you begin asking yourself, what is this that we're not doing right? Because then we need to address, the security policies that we have, as well as just look at, the agencies like he mentioned earlier on, and just get to establish what are some of these things.
For the Nyumba Kumi initiative, I think it would have worked well if at all those who had been listed to be members of the Nyumba Kumi, the leaders, at least are given something by the government. Because you can't expect somebody to leave his house to go and walk at night, and he comes with nothing. The wife will ask him, why can't you sleep instead of helping the government? And that's why you find we've been pushing for these guys called headmen. You know, the headmen of every village, being given something the way an assistant chief is given something. Or the government gives out some money to this person as a salary at the end of the month. That could work out very well in building our structure for Nyumba Kumi. Because I can tell you from the deep inside my heart that there are people who are staying in Kenya here, and nobody knows what these guys are doing. You go to places in towns, and you find a place like Mutande. You'll be surprised people who are staying in Mutande are not even the locals. They're people from other countries. And that's why somebody talked and said that if you walk around, these guys who are selling jugus on traffic jams, they are not Kenyans. They are not Kenyans. So if they are people from Burundi, they are from where? How did they come to Kenya? And does it mean that these guys can be able to come in Kenya and be able to do some other things? You remember when we arrested people for the Gen Z riots? Right. Almost 70% of the guys who were arrested were non-Kenyans. Yeah, so you find how can a non-Kenyan be involved in Gen Z riots? Right. So that tells you or indicates very clearly that Kenya, we have a very poor Nyumba Kumi initiative. If I go to Uganda right now, let's say I'm coming to visit you. The first step is you'll ask me for your copy of your passport. Second thing, the Nyumba Kumi guy will come and ask you how long will he be here and where is he coming, what is he coming to do, and the whole process goes on up to.
And these LC1s and 2s in Uganda, are they paid? Are they compensated?
Yes.
Why should it? And it's fine to compensate.
They are paid.
But what is the role of the citizens?
They are paid. They are paid, and they play a critical role in the security of Uganda. For example, the hotels are mandated to make sure that every day they have to give a list of the people who visited them. In Kenya here, you can go and stay in a lodging or a resort for 3, 4, 5 days, and nobody knows what you come to do. So this tells you how this Nyumba Kumi thing was supposed to be done. And the problem has been, I think the Minister of Interior need to think outside the box and see, you cannot apply the Ugandan Nyumba Kumi or the Rwandan Nyumba Kumi here. Right. Because Uganda have a different history. Rwanda have a different history. We have a different history. So it's a question of just getting experts, putting them together, and then asking them how best we implement Nyumba Kumi. And it should be down up, not bottom up. It should be down going up. So that now this thing is really affected. The Nyumba Kumi are able to help the OCS, and then OCS, OCPD. That way things will able to work out. So the other problem we've had is the issue of easy planning. These guys are able to plan things very easily, and I am happy that the government has put pressure on telephone companies, because that's where the problem was. Because remember one guy who was arrested, he was having 50 SIM cards. How Where did he buy them? Yeah, when somebody buys 50 SIM cards, automatically without even asking a question, that's a criminal. Because normal human being will have 2 lines, 3 lines. But somebody having 50 SIM cards, that has been a problem. But I'm happy that the government put pressure on telecommunication companies, and they were told very clearly, for you to be able to buy a line, you must be taking your passport photo, your full details. I think that has helped in terms of communication, because it was very easy for these guys to plan, and that's how, like the investigation from DStv, you find that these guys were able to go to the bank, they were able to open an account in the bank, the bank manager was able to open an account for them. These are some of the things that puts Kenya in a very awkward position as far as terrorism is concerned. But all in all, I can say, as much as we have these challenges, I think the government has tried in terms of trying to make sure they fill the gaps that are there. It's not very easy, because remember, the enemy is just here.
Right.
And these guys can cross Boni Forest, they can be able to come in Kenya. Now with the new ID, where the president proclaimed that anybody can get the ID, we don't know whether you are a Somali, or Somali Kenyan. Right. Anybody can. Now that complicates issues. So what does that mean? The security agencies have to really put the areas on top of they really have to work extra hard. 2 times more than what they've been working. Otherwise, if we don't, the bad guys will come in. Now, if that happens, now that means our passport value internationally comes down.
Okay.
Because everywhere you go to Britain, you are Kenyan, people want to check, are you really a Kenyan? You know, they want to check who you are, what have you. We shall go into serious screening as far as international visas are concerned. And that will put Kenyans who are traveling in a very awkward position.
Would we say that then the policy makers are, taking us steps ahead, like 2 steps ahead and then 10 backward? If you're going to look at some of these gaps that we continue to speak about, I mean, things that have been in existence, things that are coming in and are pretty much new, of course, in the spirit of saying, well, we want to have peaceful coexistence with our neighbors. We want to create an environment where even our neighbors can come in and, conduct their businesses, work in Kenya without having to struggle. While it might be a beautiful thing, do you suppose that then we are setting policies or security policies that are good enough to, number one, serve the purpose of ensuring that the country is secured, as well as helping us seal the gaps that have been in existence?
Leadership is the problem. Because you see now, Prof. Kindiki came in, set up policies, blah, 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 blah. Then within a short time, again he's removed. Murkomen is there, now trying to...
So is it the leadership or the structures? Because I'm assuming that if we had proper structures...
In leadership, I cannot be a leader. I come up with a very good security plan, or even say policies. Before I implement, I'm out. Now another person again comes in. Like now the current, this thing we are calling it what? The one Murkomen has been going around talking to chiefs. Yes. That's the best thing that has ever happened in my view. Yeah, because I think now Murkomen has now been able to see exactly what is on the ground. I think this should be encouraged, and they should go further and make sure that
it's a grassroots affair.
Yes, because that grassroots affair, as far as security is concerned, that's where the rubber meets the road.
All right. Yes.
Let me give you the context where we make mistakes in our country, Kenya, in terms of security and interior coordination. The persons who've been placed in this position to lead that docket don't have the required security experience. That always takes us back. And when it comes to choices, we have so many Kenyans, very highly and heavily qualified, hold these positions. And they can lead the country very well.
Yeah.
Assume, for example, you bring in somebody who has no security background. He does not know how police work, he doesn't know how APs work, he doesn't know how the army works. When he's faced with a crisis, he does too many consultations. When he comes out to the press, the kind of statement he makes when people like ourselves sit back and listen to all these guys saying, we are telling ourselves, brother, you are wrong. Whatever you're saying does not go with exactly what we require. All right? And where does this come from? It is very difficult to delink politics and security. But when you come to the crux or the core of security persons are not supposed to be involved in any political arena. Now, we need to really interpret the constitution aspect of our security organs being under civilian leadership. Where do they delink? When it comes to policy, civilians will take charge of that. But when it comes to operations, the security person in this country is supposed to take care of that. But when it comes to actual operation, you'll find that totally different. They tell us what we are supposed to do. But because security is about a chain of command and chain of structure, you end up saying yes. Some of us don't have the guts enough to say, no, this cannot be done. Go to a country like Israel or the US. This position, you cannot hold them without the preferred or solid background in that kind of an arena. They perform very well, those countries. In terms of security, they do very well. Of course, they have their own challenges, but they do very well.
Okay.
That's something we need to adapt.
Kenodi, I don't know what you make of this conversation about technocrats and politicians. And for a long time, we have had that drive where we say it is necessary to have, say, cabinet secretaries who are technocrats. But we have also seen occurrences where technocrats have literally failed certain dockets that have been accorded to them. Just how critical is the security docket that we would say the best we can do is to have a leadership that is security savvy, for instance, so that then we get it right? And what are the guarantees that we would do that if we do not have structures and systems that would help what it is that they bring on board then be implemented, even in times when they're not there?
Okay. At a fundamental level, in a system of democracy like we have, it's called a tricameral system, where you have the executive on one side, you have the judiciary on the other side, and you have a legislature on the other side, and there's a balance of power between those three different arms of leadership. It is common, even amongst those top democracies, that security dockets will usually be under civilian leadership at a cabinet secretary level or at a ministerial level. Okay. What is more important is that below that level, you need to have now the technocrats, people who have the security background, the people who have the capability to assess situations in a manner that is informed by security skills, security backgrounds, security experience. Now, but stepping back a little, we were having a discussion about policy. When you're formulating policy, Kenya, sometimes we do things half-baked. We talked of Nyumba Kumi, for example. Nyumba Kumi really should have fallen under a wider context of what is called community policing. Community policing should not be necessarily a one-way street, and it shouldn't be something shallow. It should be a long-term investment in a two-way bilateral relationship between the community and the security agencies in that community, which means at a fundamental level, you need to have trust between the citizens of the country and the security agencies that are mandated to protect them. Number two, Kenya has certain, we talked about strengths before, now let's talk about weaknesses. We have several weaknesses, some of my brothers mentioned that. One, we have an issue of corruption, which means that at a fundamental level, it is easy for people to buy their way through certain things. Somebody's crossing the border, there are certain checks and balances that should happen. Somebody comes and they're loaded with money. They buy their way through that. That is a fundamental weakness. Corruption goes in many facets. It makes people who are professional compromise their judgment because in one way or the other, their palms have been greased. So back to Nyumba Kumi, that aspect of community policing in Kenya, because of the long-standing relationship between the citizens and the security agencies, because of lack of those fundamental issues, and just because we don't do it at a comprehensive enough level to make sure that we see it through to where it works. Now, the other flip side, which is where you started your question, is politics. Yeah, Kenyan politics is a factor in these discussions, because what will usually typically happen is a leader at top national level will say, hey, let me give the docket to people I trust. Now, people you trust will usually be cronies or buddies or somebody you feel, this one has my back and will not betray. Do they have demonstrated capability to, even if they don't have necessarily a background in security? There have been leaders who have been successful, as was noted, in those dockets who did not necessarily have that experience, but they were good in making decisions. They have leadership capabilities. They have the ability to, from a management point of view, from a leadership point of view, from a visionary point of view, from a strategic point of view, to make decisions and hire the right people to do the right things. So when you get a lot of political cronyism, when consideration is simply based on who is closest to the person that's making these decisions, then this further weakens our ability to be able to confront these threats. At the end of the day, there are also economic and social issues, social economic issues that drive this. When we're talking about terrorism, we're talking about radicalization, how it happens. Sometimes somebody looks, even for the Dusit attack, you had people who were not necessarily the typical profile of somebody you would expect, somebody's father or somebody was brought up in a proper manner or was the son of somebody who was in the security sector or something, but something happens in their life. Something happens. We've seen cases where somebody feels they are disenfranchised. You've seen cases where somebody's relative gets killed and they get radicalized and all that. So those social economic issues, when you're creating a comprehensive security policy, they have to be considered. You see, crime is usually concentrated around certain areas that have some certain aspect of marginalization, whether it's economic marginalization or other marginalization, and these people feel disenfranchised, and they're easy now targets for both that radicalization that happens, but also they are not necessarily as cooperative when it comes to dealing with this threat. So if we are to be serious about addressing these issues, then we have to tackle all these things, and it has to be not on a political cycle. It has to be not on the way we do things. People have to take it seriously and understand that for you to protect yourself, you need to make an investment in the right strategies, in the right policies, and most importantly, address those root causes that are fundamental issues that keep coming up when these weaknesses seem to proliferate in certain areas.
Okay, and these weaknesses, it appears we have not addressed to the last bit, and that is the reason why we have this conversation today. And we probably also acknowledge that it can never be 101% peaceful. But the world has laughed at us at some point, or has pointed fingers. We have literally laughed at ourselves to say that locally we have not managed to address our security concerns, yet we want to stretch our hand so that the neighbor can hold and survive. And, we have taken it all the way to Haiti. We have had the conversation of Sudan recently. We have had the conversation of Somalia. And while we say that, of course, if Somalia will cough, which is pretty much what we always say, then certainly Kenya will catch a cold, Uganda will catch a cold, and therefore it's our business to ensure that, Somalia is peaceful. It becomes ironical to argue that we still have security concerns, yet we can let our soldiers out to a different world to go and create peace. We have had this discussion for the longest of time. One would want to say maybe not successfully, because ultimately the soldiers left for Haiti and they have left for other countries. What does this speak about our position? And does it mean that then just because it is not peaceful at home, then we should not get involved in what is happening in the rest of the world?
One thing I'd like to make very straight and clear is that majority of us think that sending our police officers to Haiti was a big mistake. No, it wasn't. That's the right thing that we need to do for us to have relations in the international arena. Outside of that, there are a lot of benefits that came with us deploying our persons. Of course, we were very much aware of the risks, because risk assessments had been done. We knew our gross risk and we knew our net risks. And of course, we made that decision because, number one, it allowed us to access some contracts within the United States security operations that we would not have accessed had we did not go into that kind of an agreement. The next thing, the kind of equipment that we've been given to support that mission from the leading nations is equipment that we cannot have if we were to depend on a national budget to bring them. For example, the armored vehicles that are out there, the kind of gears that are out there, right? Those are really serious things that we would not have access had we not gone to that. Like rightfully said, Kenya is geographically situated at a point where if anything happens in Kenya, other nations around us will going to catch a serious cough if we sneezed here. Why is that? If you look at, for example, how you transport goods from the coastal area of Kenya to other landlocked nations in Africa, you find that Kenya becomes a very big gateway. If the Americans would like to monitor the activities of terrorism happening in the Horn of Africa, Kenya is strategically placed for them to have, for example, Batuk in Anyuki, Laikipia, and many other bases here in Kenya. Of course, Djibouti, Djibouti and Eritrea, they have much more bases than ourselves. But we are telling ourselves here that Kenya is quite instrumental. Economically, we are a pillar in Eastern Africa. In Northern Africa, we are, Horn of Africa, we are a great pillar. So anything that happens here will lead that. When it comes back to our own national security, We do not fail from the security operational perspective, security strategy, that as operational aspect. Our failure comes from the strategic aspect. We have political leadership. For example, in banditry. Banditry has been there since I was young. I'm almost 59 years of age, and banditry is still in this country. When you go deep to find what is happening in banditry, it's a business to some people. That is why it is continuing to take root in this nation. That's why I'm saying categorically in this city that we require people with the right security experience to lead the security of this nation. For us to have a complete turnaround on how we are going to bring peace, law, and order in our nation of Kenya. Okay. It's not a matter of me sitting there and making the decisions. No, it's a matter of me knowing tactically what do I do out there. What resource do I need to allocate there or deploy there to make sure that I'm bringing this thing down to its knees? That's what we need.
Okay. You brought us to, or you painted a picture of what happened during the Gen Z protest matter, and to even acknowledge that most of the people who are now conducting business, perhaps hair business, you know, selling groundnuts, like you say, on the streets, and many other businesses, you know, are pretty much not Kenyans. Yet we're here continuing, you know, to complain about unemployment, that Kenyans do not have jobs, and that this then hugely contributes to these cases of massive radicalization, these cases of crime, you know, even local crime as it stands, or localized crime, you know, metamorphosizing by the day, that we release close to about 40,000 students, you know, or graduates to the market where they do not find employment. Do you suppose that this then plays as a double-edged sword? That while we welcome the neighbor to be calm and to be safe, while we release our students out to the job market, we actually are not giving them jobs, and therefore they become a dangerous tool as opposed to something that is supposed to be helpful to us.
And of course, that is why we had the Gen Z protest. The number of students, or the number of trainees or graduates we are releasing out outnumber the number of jobs that are there. Then on the other side, we are talking about retirement age being what? 55, 60 years. So if somebody is hanging on the job, and that job we are supposed to give a young man, then that becomes a problem. To me, I think we need to really think outside the box. In terms of how do you absorb this, and then we remove certain university courses that are not anywhere in terms of employment. For example, if your daughter goes and does a degree like anthropology, I mean, you are wondering where will she or he work? If somebody is doing something like disaster management, yes, disaster management, crisis management, where do you think there are crises in Kenya here? Where do you think there are crises for you to come and work? So if you are listening like around 10,000 guys doing crisis management, I think something is wrong somewhere. There are causes that are really very serious, and that we have shortages. For example, right now, as we are talking right now, so many Kenyans have gone on cruise ships. Very many have gone to cruise ships. And as we are speaking right now, cruise ships are coming to Kenya to do recruitment, and they can't get people. Yeah, because there are those ones who are already working, and they cannot be able to get jobs. They don't want to leave. One say, "Me, I want to work in Kenya," but those ones who are already outside, the gaps they have left cannot be filled. So the problem we have here is that we must start looking at employable skills that will turn around the economy in terms of, for example, if you do something like accounts is a very good an area that, you know, at every given time at least one person will retire, and then you're able to get in. The only issue here is this guy is being given the wrong career guidance in terms of after they finish school. They just want to do attachment, and from there he wants to get a job. Now, when he gets into an organization, he finds the old guys, the way they are treating this person, then this person gives up. But now you look at somebody who has done, let's say, security management, and this person wanted to join police or wanted to join army, and he has, right now they are picking up to 28. 28 is the maximum. So he has done several times. He's now 30. Well, that means the door for police or army or is closed. So where do you want this guy to go? This is the guy who will be, when he meets these guys, they tell him, "Come and join us, we'll give you $1,000. Yeah? This guy will be radicalized within no time and able to get on this thing. And remember, there are places where, for example, I was in Kwale. Kwale is a is one of our leading tourism area. Yeah? And something very interesting is that most of the people are working in Kwale hotels. That's Diani, going all the way up to, they are not locals. Now, the locals, if you ask them to be trained in tourism, I don't think they are interested. Okay. So this is the thing that the governor should really think out of the box. Make sure that instead of waiting for these guys to be radicalized, you radicalize them in hospitality. Okay. So at the end of the day, they are able to take over jobs into the hotels in Mombasa. Yes. So if we do that, I think we shall available the youth in Kwale, the youth in Kilifi, the youth in Malindi. But now, the approach that is being given here is people are not doing the right courses that are relevant to where the jobs are available. And by the time somebody finishes, he goes back home. If you are a lady, the first word you will get from your mother. Okay. Why can you get out, you get married, and you go where your friends normally go. Get married and get out of my way. Get out of my way. So with the ladies, maybe you could get married and forget about it and start but the young man graduating with a degree, for example, in anthropology, yeah, it means you can only work in a museum, and we only have one national museum. Now, something like aviation, it's very wrong for you to advise your child to go into aviation. Yes, how many aviation companies are we having in Kenya? They are very few.
Is it so? Yeah. I mean, I want this gentleman to also weigh in and tell us whether then the argument holds water in any manner, because, I mean, there are students who are actually taking anthropology, they are taking aviation at this very point. Does this scare them? And to even imagine about, our children who have lived to that level of, getting into the space of employment is perhaps maybe far-fetched, because today we are speaking of teenage gangs, stories that we have carried, that you go to Upper Mathare and the people who are terrorizing the residents, or even the people who come to visit these areas, are as little as this. And you want to ask yourself, where have we gone wrong in terms of shaping our children, such that then that becomes a basis of dealing with the question of insecurity on the onset?
So the larger context we are discussing is what I said was a root cause, which is the socio-economic issues. Yeah. Now, when you come to the area of jobs and careers, in Kenya, it's a dicey issue, because do the young people really have a choice? One, a lot of young people, when they're students, they're driven to certain careers, most of the time not of their own volition or because they're willing. On one side is a parent telling them, you should do this, and a lot of pressure is put on them to go a certain way. Number two, almost always the consideration is purely economic. This job seems to be employing more, this one seems to be paying more, and this one seems to be employing more. Right. The third aspect is now the idea, which is now where we should focus. I mean, you have natural God-given talents, you have skills, you have abilities, you have your strengths, you have your weaknesses, you have your personality, and these things do matter when you're choosing a career. Now, like it was observed before, we have a shortage of employment opportunities here in Kenya. Number one, a lot of people are going to school, they're going to colleges and universities, they're graduating and not getting enough jobs. So when people are not working out of a very well thought out, calculated, and most importantly, objectively thought out, balanced approach, which is what is best for me to do based on my skills, based on my abilities, based on my God-given talents and all that. And number two, where do I feel I can fit the most, and where do I feel I can contribute the most? Yeah. Those are factors that do matter. So when we are talking about socioeconomic issues, you mentioned Mathare and many other areas that are generally considered either slums or just poorly resourced, poor, economic difficulties thrive in those places, then those do drive issues like crime. They do have an aspect, they are a factor when you come to security considerations. Naturally, all these things are issues of leadership, because when you have the right leadership in place, when you have a right vision, when you have a society where these opportunities and these structures, like my brothers are discussing, are supposed to, it's the tenet. The tenets of these areas at a fundamental level are things that the government needs to be not only thinking about, but facilitating. It is a job. It is a role of government working with other sectors to create those jobs, to create those opportunities, to create policies that address where should we be headed in this area in the 21st century? Where is, for example, the intersection between technology and security? Where is, where are the jobs most likely to come from? But also, what are the challenges we face? What are the threats we face? What do we need to employ? Okay. So we've seen, like I said earlier, weaknesses or just structural deficiencies in how we approach, even from a leadership point of view, whereby we're just almost opportunistic on one side, and then on the other side, politics seems to drive a lot of things. So we need to separate, number one, politics from this. Number two, we need to tackle this issue of corruption. Number three, we need to tackle socio-economic issues, especially when there are injustices. Socio-economic injustices are a primary factor when it comes to the matters that we're discussing today. So from a career point of view, I would say that there needs to be a fundamental rethinking of how we approach academics and career opportunities and jobs and how they are created. And the government has a role to play in that, and other sectors of the society have a role to play in that as well. A young person in Kenya today is really juggling very difficult choices and options, and most of the time the career they choose is not a factor of, I chose to do this because I feel I'm best equipped to do this. This is where I feel my calling is. This is where I feel my skills, my talents, my God-given abilities should be driving me towards.
Okay. I'm glad that you bring in the question of leadership, which you also brought on board. And one would want to ask, in as much as maybe the African leaders, for instance, would want to take a massive approach that would shift, the peaceful or the insecurity concerns that we continue to have, just how open are the big brothers in terms of making sure that this then is viable, this is worked on? Because there's always been this talk that there's always that, the external hand, that is in charge. There's always United States somewhere when you're talking about peace in Somalia, in Sudan, in Kenya. There's always United States, America somewhere, when even Kenya is walking in to, just send troops in Haiti. And you have acknowledged that, Chris, by saying that we probably do not have the capacity in terms of even funding to fund the activities there. And therefore, that's the reason why we have to stretch our hands and request the bigger brothers to step in. Just how open are they? And when you look at some of the approaches that the likes of Trump are taking, is this in favor of their nation? Should perhaps the African leaders as well adapt that? Because when we're talking about, Trump or the Trump factor and policy that speaks of nationalization, just America, America first and all that, it works in favor of them, and how does it impact the rest of the global fraternity?
There are fundamental facts here. Number one, we must at all times act in the interest of our nation. Nation is Kenya. But when you come to the globalization arena, you find that the big brothers are controlling quite a huge chunk of the globe.
Right.
If you come to the financial system, the Americans own SWIFT, that is theirs. You cannot transact internationally without SWIFT. If they decide to take that away, we are done. We cannot be able to complete our international trades. If you come to the internet, they own that. At one point, Trump in his campaigns had threatened, why don't we pull out this internet from Africa? What would that mean to us? The business that we do on the net, the interconnectedness and the Internet of Things will go away. When you come to their military might, you find that the Western, the Easterners, they will build military might in their nations to be able to protect their interests in the globe. If you look at how they deploy the military wares, if you look at how they deploy their military resources, is to particularly guard a certain interest that talks well to the country. Why do we find wars in certain areas? Because these Westerners have an interest in that area, and the more that war is fueled, the more military contractors back at home are proliferating in terms of financial flow, the more there's business toward that area. So if you look at the other aspect of leadership, they lead the globe. We need to start finding African solutions for African problems. I know that will take a very long time. But we have our own sons and daughters who have been educated, who have advanced themselves in terms of technology. We see some of our own in Africa developing their own technology. The other day I saw two African gentlemen who had fallen out of school, had made their own AI robotic, and it was working pretty well. What are we telling ourselves? We need to go probably the Burkina Faso way and start capitalizing or maximizing on the internal resources and capacity that we have here in Africa to develop solutions right from here in Africa. If you look at how France have exited Burkina Faso and how Burkina Faso is taking a trajectory towards development, it basically tells you inawezekana. It is possible as long as we have that willingness, and our leaders are not elected the possibility that CIA of America had some interest and led them into that position, so that when they try to make a move, they'll be threatened. If you do that, you lose your position and they get worried. If we can have that independence where African leaders can make their own African decisions to the interests of the African nations, maybe we can get ourselves out of these yokes of neocolonialism.
And you think, briefly, before I come to you, that Ibrahim Traore is going somewhere with this, looking at the kind of backlash that then he receives again from that international space, and now that he brings in the question of technology, just how are we leveraging on that as well to address, our security concerns? Because they say the enemy or the terrorist is always 10 steps ahead, and now with AI, they are literally perhaps even 20 steps ahead. Yeah.
Well, firstly, when you're talking about national security interest, every country has their national security interest. It is the area where they intersect, where now you get geopolitics being played. People have said that, African countries are pawns in the larger strategic game. Yeah. And countries like Kenya are really central to that. I think, one, we need to address issues of how we work as a region and how we work as a continent. Right. Because when you notice, for example, I'll give an example. There's NATO, which is the North America Treaty Organization. North America has 3 countries. It has the United States, it has Mexico, and it has Canada. But now they've been able to rally almost, a whole cross-section of countries across the world. Even us, we were talking about the major non-NATO ally designation. Yeah. And to think of it, and of course, of those 3 countries, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, of course, the United States is the driving factor. So we need to rethink how we approach, one, geopolitics. We need to rethink how we approach regional issues. We need to rethink how, as a regional bloc, you look at Europe, they have the European Union. You look at North America, like we just said, and there are all these groupings. Now, from an area of, from a technology perspective, as my brothers observed, of course, some of these countries have a bigger hand because they are driving not only the technologies that, that fuel some of these areas like artificial intelligence and machine learning and these other automotive sort of technologies that are there, but they also seem to really dominate the playing field. Now, from an African point of view, let's talk about Kenya. You will go to any country across the globe and you'll find a Kenyan at the top of many spheres of the socio-economic system, at the top of their field, whether it's a technological field or otherwise. And you find that we are very bright and brilliant people. So as has been suggested, we need to start thinking out of the box. We need to step back from the game is being played a certain way, and how you win a strategic game is not always playing by the adversaries' rules or by playing by, you're always responsive to what they're doing. We can step back and say, hey, we have a lot of collateral here in terms of human intelligence, human capacity, in terms of labor force, in terms of very brilliant. Kenya has one of the most educated workforces in Africa. And now if you look at how even AI, like my brother said, is being deployed here, if we had the resources invested in that, it would make a huge difference. Again, it all comes back to leadership, not just country level leadership, regional leadership, continental leadership, how we position ourselves across the board. Right. If we can have a seat at the UN Security Council, if we can be a major non-NATO ally, if we can have all this, we can have seats at the table, we certainly have the capability, especially if African leaders would work together towards that goal. Unfortunately, like was observed, there's a divide and conquer where a lot of the leaders are given economic incentives. Where those don't work, they're given the threats, and it's a game of chess that is played, and we always seem to be the pawns.
Herbert Okello from Subaland, Homa Bay County says, peace is not good for business. Legal or illegal businesses thrive in the war-prone areas. That's why people go to an extent of funding terrorists to create a gap for a specific commodity, perhaps in agreement to what it is that you say. It's a game of chess. There's always going to be persons that are actually calling the shots. And sometimes when you're vulnerable enough or you're weak enough to accept to that, you certainly dance to
But
their
remember,
tune.
just to add, we do have resources
Right.
that a lot of these global players don't. As I say, not just actual resources in terms of minerals and all that. We have capacity that is a lot of capacity that they don't have. We have an educated and very young workforce. We have a lot of things that we could still play to our advantage. So if the leaders were more strategic and visionary and saw the long term and came together and worked on this, there is a way we could tilt a lot of that balance, and it is feasible. Yes. So we shouldn't just resign ourselves to saying we're just pawns on a chessboard. There are things that can be done.
And it begins from that point of, electing the right leaders, even before it goes to the leaders themselves. We're almost getting to that level of 2027. As you weigh in on what it is that you'd want to say in regards to what the gentlemen have said, this evening I was supposed to have NCIC boss as well, that is Mheshimiwa Kobia, to weigh in on this matter. He could not make it. And many have castigated the body that he bosses because they say, well, it's toothless, what are they doing? You talked about agencies, or John talked about agencies earlier on. We have so many security agencies. Just how effective as we
Okay, first of all, I want to say that it's a fact. We cannot do without America. That one, from a security perspective,
at least at this point,
we should not cheat ourselves.
Okay.
I'm a beneficiary. I was trained in Hawaii, America, and a good number of our experts, the ones we have both in different areas, were trained by the Americans. The equipment we are using in police right now, the equipment we are using in countering terrorism are all donations from the American government. Yeah? Our people have been trained in UK. In fact, the army normally go to, is it Sanders? Yeah? So there are things we cannot try to lie. It's a fact that these guys have played a very important role in improving our security, in capacity building, and we cannot just say that these guys, they've done nothing. Right. Yeah? Most of the trainings that are done in Kenya with the main interest of improving our efficiency is done by either Britain, UK, I don't know whether there's any other, and Israel. Those three countries, those three nations have really played a very critical role. In fact, in moving us from point A to point B to point C, and making sure that we are moving in a modern way of handling things. Okay. Having said that, I think the question of the leaders we pick, and that's where now problem comes in 2027. Because if you don't pick the right leaders, then people will make some decisions that at the end of the day, they are only benefiting. This Haiti thing, people have been talking about it and saying, why should the police officers go to Haiti when we have problems here? I'm telling you, we have a very strong relationship with these guys. They've given us equipment, they've given us training, and at the end of the day, giving 400 police officers to go to Haiti, that's just like a drop in the ocean. Okay. As long as they're able to go and help those guys get some peace and come back. First of all, jobs have been created for police officers. Yeah. Number two, police officers going outside to go and learn real things from that country. When they come back here, they have a different way of looking at things. So it's not a question of just saying that they should stay around. This issue of racket rustling has been there, and it has been there. And strictly speaking, I think I've come here several times, and we were told very clearly this thing has got political connotations, where there are politicians who wanted to continue. They wanted to continue that at the end of the day, they are able to have supremacy. Let these guys fight, let this guy fight. And in fact, one of them told us, even the cows that these guys are stealing, they are driven from there and they are sold in Nairobi. So these are things that at the end of the day is a question of the Ministry of Interior coming up with strategies that at the end of the day, they will be able to help the guys in Marakwet, the guys in Turkana, the guys in Lodwar to be able to end that problem. Yeah. Then on the issue of what you've talked about...
NCIC,
yes.
Let's just talk about the investigative bodies, the agencies of security that we have.
Let me tell you, we have a well-trained team for CID. I've been in Rwanda, I've been in Tanzania, I've been in most African countries, and I can tell you our CID, the Criminal Investigations Department, is top-notch. I can just tell you, top-notch. And a very good example was how they investigated the very thing. Within a few seconds, these guys were already nabbed. The only problem is the issue of politics. Politics is the normal issue. Don't target that guy is my guy. Okay. Don't target that guy. So it makes guys now to be big-headed and to be able to, for the things that are not. Now that comes now to NSIC. These guys are supposed to make sure that they actually, I've just been hearing these guys are there, they are earning money, and I've never seen them taking anybody to court. Okay. I've never seen them taking any action. I've never seen them. I mean,
they'll tell you they don't have prosecution
a whole parastatal, a whole team of people being there. We are being talked. Our people are investigating. Our people are investigating. Have you ever had any case where they've taken anybody to court? Nobody. So this we just call them a toothless dog that is wasting people's time. And you see right now as we are going on, you see how people are very. The politics is getting hot. People are really talking nonsense, and you can see very well people talking about their communities being targeted. You see what people are talking about. For example, what happened in Kisii, where somebody was talking on the stage, and another one comes and he grabs the microphone. What are we showing the young people? What are we showing Gen Zs? Are we telling them that now we as leaders, we can fight in front of, we've gone to a funeral to go and mourn? Then can you mourn and stop fighting in funerals? These are things that NSIC should pick these things very fast, bring people, take them to court as per the law. Okay. As per the law. But as things stand right now, we have our body that is there, that is not doing anything. They want, when they come on television, they tell us, oh, you know, we are following up. And they've been following up since last year, since the other year. I've never, since that body was formed. Right. Chris, maybe, have you seen anybody being taken to court? I've never seen being taken to court.
I think that gives Chris the cue to speak, because then we say politics would certainly run, is a bloodline to every activity of a nation, and therefore we can't run away from it. We're in that heated season. Before we address the leaders that are going to come, we must address those ones that are actually, or we must talk about those ones that are in existence. And today we are in that broad-based government. Is it achieving the intended cohesion and inclusive development purpose? Because that is the argument that they brought or sold to us. They said, all right, with Raila on the other side, we will have maandamano every day, and it's not going to be a peaceful nation. There's not going to be security. We'll continue to talk about issues of insecurity. Do you suppose it's actually doing that?
The public perception that is out there right now is that these guys aren't doing anything. But let us be pragmatic here and speak candidly. There are very many things that our security agencies do that we are not getting, you don't get to be told. Right. A lot of successes out there that you don't get to be told. But when they fail, that comes the limelight, and we're able to we judge them from that particular perspective. Not quite fair, but also we're telling them, the security agencies, we need peace, so they need to work extra. Particularly our intelligence section. They are very good, I've got a lot of resources, they've got a very huge budget, they need to convert that into action, preventative action, that goes a long way in establishing Kenya as the most peaceful nation around Africa. There. When you come to this broad-based government, I don't know how I would judge them. But I want to say that over a very short period of time, we have seen that some of the threats in our nation materializing. One of the threats in our nation is terrorism and violent crime. We have seen in the last 4 months, in terms of frequency, a very high frequency, in terms of severity, a very high severity, because we've lost 2 lives. Right? Almost the same methodologies. So what are we telling ourselves? We're telling ourselves that a lot of things need to be done for us to quell these kind of things. We have seen there's been a very huge call for us to use electronic security, CCTV, because cameras don't lie. If you look at the case that my chairman has mentioned for the deceased, Weri Ongondo, the DCI did very well. In the case of Mbobu, the deceased brother, they equally did well. But at the back end of it, there is always that burden that will drag you not to accomplish your mission well, because there are other lagging factors, dragging indicators that will stop you from doing that, right? That's why I'm a very pragmatic campaigner and a proponent that if Kenya can be the first nation in the globe to find a solution to delink politics from security, probably we'll find our answer. But globally, politics and security are quite intertwined. And I'm praying that my country can be the first country in the world that can find that solution to link these two and see how our security apparatus would operate. Well,
until then, we are staring at 2027 politics. And I mean, we have begun seeing the kind of talks that, are being uttered around. Some you would want to call intolerance talks of intolerance, hate speech, what you would actually label it. But there's quite been trouble trying to identify what is hate speech and what is not. Sometimes you have this on the dock, the next time they're out, because it's quite difficult to, you know, substantiate that this would be hate speech. Perhaps we need to remind ourselves of the cost of political instability. If we're going to talk about investor confidence, you know, and even exit, because some have exited because of that. If we're going to talk about terrorists themselves actually taking advantage of the political situation to camouflage and come in and attack. And just generally, how is, you know, we become unstable. Looking at the political situation. And it's even worse when you're looking at leaders that are actually saying the current leadership is not good. And you look at the others and you probably do not see any element of hope in terms of bringing security.
First of all, let me address a point that was discussed earlier. I lived in the United States for 12.5 years. My security training came from there. Actually, not just training, experience. I managed security for one of the top, largest cities in there. At the fundamental, you know, when the crux of the matter when the rubber meets the road is that from a leadership perspective, a good leader should be able to influence. We may not be key players in terms of resources and all that, but a good leader is able to strategically position themselves. Again, I reiterate the fact that if we can get ourselves a seat at the United Nations Security Council, if we can get ourselves to be major non-NATO ally designation, our brothers here, you know, they hold a contrarian view. And it's a correct view about this Haiti situation, and because they're approaching it from a very well-informed position of how it enables us to position ourselves better in terms of influence, in terms of being a key player in the game, in terms of even being willing to do operations that others are not willing to do. So leadership is key. Now, to your question, the Kenyan citizen, we've talked a lot about the role of the government and the security agencies. Now let's address the big white fat elephant in the room, and that's a Kenyan citizen. From a leadership point of view, the Kenyan citizen is the board of directors. They are the shareholders who decide who's going to become the executive. The management of the company is in their hands. And we have a very lackadaisical approach to electing leaders. And you mentioned it. We are seeing those approaches. Let me mention one thing we've noticed. Now you notice this idea of deploying goons against your political opponents and your competitors. Even when issues of governance arise, you know, people find it very easy to just deploy goons. Who are these goons? They're the same, unemployed youth that don't have the opportunity, the socio-economic opportunities that we talked about, that now somebody decides to take advantage of and say, just because this person doesn't have a job, let me go and, you know, bribe them with 2,000 shillings and give them, you know, a long, wooden stick or some weapons, machetes and all that, and ask them to, you know, deploy them to attack your opponent. We should have zero tolerance for that kind of nonsense as a community, because what if everybody deploys guns? You know, what will we be able to do, both from a political point of view, from a governance point of view, just from how we handle our affairs? So I believe the Kenyan citizen also needs to take on their responsibility seriously in terms of electing leaders. We've seen the game being played, and we've become, sorry to say, a bribery society. The same corruption that we were talking about, people are bribed, you know, here it's unga, there it's, this much in Kenya shillings, there it is, or projects. You know, why should you be bribed with a project to influence your ability to elect a certain leader? What are you giving up in return? You're giving up the ability of you as a young person getting a job. You're giving up the ability of your children getting the opportunities they deserve. You're giving up the right for Kenyans to enjoy good leadership from leaders that are visionary, strategic, people who are qualified for the job, people who are competent, who are capable, and not just moneyed. What we've created is a cycle where people amass wealth through corrupt and other means, so that they can fuel the next election cycle and bribe the next bunch of citizens to elect them and subsidize for their incompetence. Because unfortunately, that's what really this is about. So we need to also rethink our role as Kenyan citizens in electing the right kind of leaders, and those strategic kind of leaders who are visionary will get us to where we need to be.
Right, strictly 30 seconds to close it.
I think we've done very well. I think what we need to do is the government should now think outside the box so that we continue making this country safe in the best interest of the hospitality industry that, gets affected when there's a problem. And for example, when we had the Gen Z protests, I think so many people cancelled visits to Kenya. They all went to Tanzania, and some were even jumping on at the airport going to Uganda. And that has the economy so badly. Okay. So let's just ensure that we work on this. And I encourage Murkomen to continue doing what he's doing, because at the end of the day, he's able to hear from the ground what is happening and the challenges the chiefs and assistant chiefs are having. Once we do that, I think the country will be more safe.
30 seconds, Chris.
For me, we must align our national security to our national objectives. And we need to go whatever stride we need to go to make sure those two are completely aligned. With good security, good business.
Okay. Kiruthi, allow me to rob you of the 30 seconds and close it at that very point. Thank you so much. Last speaker, Chris Otieno, security expert. They all are security experts, as well as Dr. Enoch Makanga. And last but not least, John Kinuthia. Time is extremely out of our side, and therefore we must close it at that very point. But the conversation continues on our social media platforms, so make sure that you continue to keep it TV47 Kenya. It was great having you. We appreciate the contribution, and we also appreciate you back at home for as well being part and parcel of the talk, and the entire team that has made the broadcast a success, including the sign language interpreter Catherine Simaloi. We say kwaheri from this end. My name is Linda Alela. Do have yourself a lovely week ahead. Bye-bye.